I trusted him. My manager. The person who was supposed to guide me, mentor me, show me the ropes, help me navigate the treacherous waters of corporate politics. I believed he had my back, that he genuinely wanted to see me succeed. After all, mentorship was supposed to be a two-way street, a partnership, right? I was wrong again. I never thought a single project could change my life, and yet it did. I remember that moment clearly. Sitting at my desk, surrounded by drafts, emails, design notes, and client briefs, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and pride. Every idea, every calculation, every late-night correction, every extra effort, I had poured it all into this one project, believing that it would not only define my career but also prove my capabilities to myself and to everyone around me. I thought I was working toward recognition, toward growth, toward respect. I was wrong. It started with subtle signs. The compliments from our boss that somehow always landed on him, the clients praising him for ideas that I had meticulously crafted, the slight nods in meetings, and the acknowledgement that never came my way. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was just too sensitive. Maybe I was overthinking. But the truth has a way of making itself known. And it hit me like a sledgehammer. One day, during a team meeting, he presented the project, my project, as if it were entirely his own. The room was silent, save for the polite nods of our colleagues. I watched my ideas, my hours of work, my sleepless nights, being displayed as his genius. I wanted to stand up and shout. I wanted to scream, to demand justice. But I didn't. I froze. I couldn't believe it. How could someone I trusted betray me so completely? How could someone take not just my work but my future, my credibility, my voice, and claim it as their own? The shock was paralyzing. My heart raced, my hands shook, and I felt a deep, gnawing anger that I had never experienced before. But it wasn't just anger. It was humiliation. It was the realization that in this corporate battlefield, talent alone wasn't enough. Recognition wasn't earned by hard work. It could be stolen. And I was just learning that lesson in the harshest way possible. I remember staring at my manager as he spoke, his confidence unshaken, his arrogance radiating. He smiled, took notes from the client's questions, and subtly shifted the focus to himself. Every word he uttered, every gesture he made, felt like a personal attack. And yet, beneath all that, I began to see cracks. His confidence, though intimidating, was built on a fragile foundation. It was all show. And that was my first glimmer of hope. I couldn't react impulsively. I couldn't confront him and risk losing everything I had worked for. I knew that would be foolish. I had to think strategically. I had to plan. And that's when the seed of an idea began to grow inside me. A plan to reclaim not just my work, but my dignity, my reputation, and my future. I realized that if I played this correctly, I could expose him not through anger or confrontation, but through intelligence, patience, and clever strategy. I could turn his arrogance and insecurity against him. As I sat there, in that meeting, I made a silent vow. I would not allow him to win. I would not allow my work to be stolen without consequence. But this was not going to be a story about revenge fueled by rage. No. This was going to be a story about justice, about cleverness, about using every tool at my disposal to reveal the truth in the most undeniable way possible. I would make sure that the world, including our clients and our boss, saw the real story. I would make him stumble on his own pride, his own ego, and his own incompetence. That night, after everyone had left the office, I stayed behind. The hum of the fluorescent lights was comforting in its monotony. I started reviewing every document, every email, every note I had made. I began to track every instance where my contributions had been ignored or misrepresented. I made a mental map of my project, connecting ideas to outcomes, linking every detail to my own effort. And as I worked, I began to see a pattern that would allow me to not just expose him, but outsmart him completely. I realized then that this was more than a single project. This was a test of character, a test of patience, a test of intelligence. And I was ready. Ready to play the long game. Ready to let him reveal his weaknesses on his own. ready to turn every misstep, every lie, every stolen idea into a stepping stone toward the truth. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you know the feeling, the cold, hollow realization that your trust was misplaced. But what you might not know is that betrayal can also be a teacher. It can teach you strategy, resilience, patience, and the power of playing smarter rather than harder. And that's exactly what I decided to do. I wasn't going to confront him immediately. I wasn't going to lash out. I was going to observe, to plan, and to execute in such a way that the truth would reveal itself naturally and painfully for him. This is the story of how my manager tried to steal my career, how I uncovered the betrayal, and how I set in motion a plan so precise, so carefully executed, that his arrogance would be his own undoing. And along the way, I learned something even more important. Patience, intelligence, and integrity are far more powerful than anger. They are the real weapons in any battle for justice. And this battle, I knew, was only beginning. After that meeting, I realized something crucial. If I wanted justice, if I wanted to reclaim my career and my credibility, I had to prove, first to myself, and then to the world, exactly how much I had contributed. The problem was, the environment I was in wasn't built for fairness. It was built for appearances, for ego, for power plays. And my manager, he thrived in that chaos. I started observing him closely, not in a paranoid, obsessive way, but as a strategist. Every email he sent, every client call he attended, every small decision he made, I watched carefully. I realized quickly that he didn't truly understand the work we were doing. The strategies, the analysis, the technical solutions, the client customizations, he barely scratched the surface. But in meetings, in front of the boss, he acted as if he was the mastermind behind it all. That arrogance, that sheer confidence, despite incompetence, made me both furious and determined. Meanwhile, I poured every ounce of energy I had into the project. I spent nights perfecting presentations, refining calculations, and double-checking every report. I created strategies no one had thought of, solutions to problems before they even arose. I drafted emails to clients that anticipated their every question. I created visual presentations that explained complex ideas in simple terms. Every detail mattered. Every idea mattered. And I knew that without my work, this project would collapse. Yet somehow, the world only seemed to notice him. At first, it was subtle. The praise that should have gone to me landed on his desk. The boss asked him questions that I had answered in private emails, as if I wasn't the one with the knowledge. And the clients, they assumed he was the brain behind the project, because he spoke confidently, with authority even when he had no clue. Every small injustice was like a drop of water in a bucket, filling it with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and determination. I remember one particular evening I had been working late, the office empty except for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional flicker of fluorescent lights. My computer screen was filled with calculations, draft emails, client responses, and design iterations. And there he was, walking by my desk, glancing over my shoulder at the files I had been preparing for hours. I could see him scanning my work, nodding slightly, and then taking a note in his own pad as if he had come up with the ideas himself. That moment crystallized everything. I realized he didn't just want credit, he needed it. He craved the appearance of competence to mask his insecurity. I spoke to a close friend about it that night over the phone. She knew me well and had seen my struggles. "You're too talented for him to overshadow you forever," she said. "But you have to be smart. Don't confront him blindly. Document everything. Plan your moves." Her words echoed in my mind. She was right. This wasn't just about doing my job. This was about survival. About strategy. About patience. The work didn't get any easier. In fact, it became more exhausting. But I knew that each late night, each extra email, each draft and redesign was building a foundation for something bigger. I wasn't just completing a project, I was preparing evidence. I was creating a trail that would eventually prove, without a doubt, who the real contributor was. Meanwhile, he continued to coast. He would occasionally glance at the project, make a small comment, or send an email to the boss taking partial credit for minor contributions I hadn't even noticed. He thought he was untouchable. He didn't see the careful, meticulous plan forming behind the scenes. He didn't know I was documenting every step he took, every interaction, every stolen credit, every misstep. And that would be his undoing. I remember a day when he presented a minor update to the boss. It was something I had been refining for hours. He read from my notes, mispronounced client names, and gave vague explanations. The boss didn't seem convinced, but didn't intervene either. I watched silently, knowing this would eventually be part of the larger picture. That moment was like a small crack in his armor. And I knew, with patience, the crack would grow until the whole facade crumbled. As I continued to work, I realized something profound. The project wasn't just about work or recognition anymore. It was a lesson in strategy, in patience, in understanding human behavior. I learned how to anticipate his moves, how to leave subtle gaps that would later expose him, how to appear cooperative while actually building my case quietly. Every presentation I prepared, every client email I drafted, every team update I sent was another step in a carefully orchestrated plan to reveal the truth. And in that moment, late at night, staring at my desk, I made a silent vow to myself: I would reclaim my work. I would reclaim my voice. I would show the world who truly deserved recognition. But I would do it carefully. I would do it cleverly. I would do it in such a way that his own arrogance would be his downfall. And I would do it without losing my integrity. The first step was simple: keep working, keep documenting, and let him continue to believe he was in control. Every small mistake he made, every misattribution, every moment of overconfidence would become a stepping stone for the moment when I would reveal the truth. The stage was set, and I was ready. The game had begun. It happened slowly at first. Little moments I almost ignored, almost convinced myself were coincidences. But then it became undeniable. One day, I opened my email and saw it, a client's message praising my manager for the exact ideas, strategies, and solutions I had painstakingly developed. My heart sank. I reread the email twice, hoping I was mistaken. But no, every line reflected my work, my late nights, my attention to detail. And yet, the praise was addressed to him. My ideas were his, my effort invisible. My stomach twisted, a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the screen, feeling a strange numbness. Part of me wanted to storm into his office and demand an explanation. But another part knew that would be reckless. This wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was professional, calculated, and public. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had been carefully positioning himself to take credit, building a facade of competence while I did all the work. And the worst part? People believed it. It wasn't only the clients. During a team meeting, my boss referred to my manager as the lead on the project. He praised the strategy, the solutions, the presentation, all of which I had created. I felt my chest tighten. The world had given him the spotlight, and I was left in the shadows. Every nod, every polite smile from colleagues, felt like salt in the wound. I couldn't believe how someone could manipulate perception so flawlessly. How could the person you trust be capable of such deceit? As I struggled with my emotions, a close friend at work, someone who had seen my long hours and dedication, pulled me aside. "I think he's using you," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "Be careful. He doesn't deserve your trust. Don't let him manipulate the narrative." Her words hit me like a warning bell. I realized then that this wasn't a simple oversight or a minor mistake. It was deliberate, calculated, and personal. And the deeper I looked, the more I saw the pattern. He was insecure. That insecurity drove him to control everything around him. Every team member, every project, every interaction was a test of his ego. And I, the diligent, competent worker, was a threat. I could see it in his eyes during meetings, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the small smirk when he presented my ideas as his own, the way he avoided direct questions from me in public. It wasn't confidence, it was fear disguised as arrogance. I started documenting everything, carefully. Every email he sent, every client message, every meeting note, every presentation draft. I tracked it all. I needed to see the pattern, to understand how far this manipulation went, and how I could ultimately use it against him. This wasn't just about proving my worth anymore. It was about revealing the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. I had to be methodical. I had to plan. And most importantly, I had to remain calm, even as the betrayal burned like fire in my chest. There were moments when I questioned myself. Was I overreacting? Could I have misunderstood his actions? But the evidence kept piling up. My work was consistently attributed to him. My ideas were presented as his. The clients believed him. Even the boss, though kind and fair, was unaware of the manipulation. And that realization hurt more than anything, the understanding that talent and hard work alone weren't enough. Perception could be stolen, and he was a master thief. My friend continued to warn me, offering perspective and advice. "You need a strategy," she said. "If you confront him now, you'll look like you're complaining. If you expose him carefully, using facts and evidence, it will be undeniable. Let him reveal himself. You don't need to force it." Her words resonated with me. I realized that revenge wasn't about immediate gratification. It wasn't about confrontation. It was about patience, intelligence, and planning. That was the only way to reclaim what was mine. That night, I went home, unable to sleep. I reviewed the project drafts, the emails, the notes I had sent, the presentations I had designed. Everything was there, a trail that mapped my contributions in meticulous detail. I could see where he had inserted himself, how he had subtly misrepresented my work, and how he had exploited gaps I had left in public explanations, gaps that seemed minor but were enough for him to present the work as his own. It was a calculated betrayal, and understanding it was the first step toward turning the tables. I began to think strategically. I knew that exposing him would require more than evidence, it would require timing, context, and subtlety. I couldn't simply confront him or show proof out of the blue. The world needed to see the story unfold naturally, in a way that highlighted his incompetence and my integrity. Every email I sent, every update I documented, every client interaction I carefully orchestrated, became part of a plan to let him stumble on his own, to let his arrogance reveal him, to let the truth speak for itself. And in that moment, as the office lights dimmed and the city slept outside my window, I made a vow. I would not let him take my future. I would not let my hard work be stolen. And I would do it smartly, carefully, and effectively. His betrayal had awakened something in me, something focused, intelligent, and unstoppable. And I knew, deep down, that the moment he underestimated me completely, the truth would be revealed, and justice would follow. This was my first real glimpse of betrayal in the workplace. It was painful, it was infuriating, and it was personal. But it also marked the turning point, the moment I stopped feeling helpless and started planning. The stage was set, and the game had begun. Little did he know, the very arrogance that allowed him to steal my work would become the reason he could never keep it. After the first signs of betrayal, I knew that rushing into a confrontation would be foolish. My manager thrived on appearances. He was confident, charming, and manipulative, and any premature move could have backfired. If I wanted justice, I had to be strategic. I had to be meticulous. And above all, I had to ensure that when the truth finally came out, I tracked every client interaction he had, noting where he contributed and where he relied on my work. I kept a careful record of every email, every draft, every presentation slide, every idea I had contributed. I started creating a timeline of events, a digital map that clearly showed which tasks were mine, which were his, and how he had been presenting my work as his own. I also began to notice subtle patterns in his behavior, his insecurities, his reliance on misdirection, and the way he avoided accountability. For instance, he would casually forward my emails to clients with minor changes, and then present the work as if it had been his original thought. He would exaggerate his contributions in team meetings, while subtly undermining my input. I realized that he was a master of perception manipulation. And if I wanted to expose him, I had to think like him and then think one step ahead. At the same time, I began crafting small, deliberate tests. I would leave gaps in my explanations or send draft documents that required input, knowing he would try to fill them in and present them as finished work. Each time he made a mistake, it became another piece of evidence. Every misstep was carefully documented and time-stamped, creating a trail that would be impossible to deny later. It was painstaking work, but I knew patience would be my greatest ally. I also began discreetly involving clients in small ways. I would ask clarifying questions, subtly reminding them of my involvement without alerting him. I started scheduling meetings with them where I could observe interactions, note discrepancies, and quietly gather more proof. It was delicate. I couldn't be obvious, or he would become suspicious. I had to make it look natural, effortless, and professional. And slowly, the pieces were coming together. My workspace became a quiet war room. Spreadsheets, emails, drafts, and presentations filled my monitors. I labeled every file, tracked every contribution, and cross-referenced every client response. I even started noting patterns in how he misrepresented my work, cataloging examples of his misattribution, exaggerations, and errors. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. I felt a sense of control I hadn't felt since discovering the betrayal. For the first time, I wasn't powerless, I was preparing my move. I confided in a trusted friend again, discussing my strategy in whispers over coffee breaks and after-hours calls. "Be patient," she said. "Let him slip up. Let him show his incompetence naturally. Your evidence, your work, will speak louder than confrontation ever could." Her words were a reminder that this was not just about revenge, it was about clarity, integrity, and justice. I had to be smarter than him, not just angrier. One of the key elements of my strategy was to let him continue thinking he was untouchable. He had an ego so fragile that any hint of exposure would trigger defensive behavior. Something I could use to my advantage. I began creating scenarios where his lack of knowledge or skill would inevitably become apparent in front of clients or our boss. Each carefully orchestrated interaction was designed to reveal his incompetence without me having to confront him directly. It was subtle, almost surgical, but I knew it would work. As the days passed, I noticed small victories. A client asked him a question he couldn't answer without relying on my notes. A team meeting exposed gaps in his understanding. I quietly documented everything, timestamps, emails, and notes, making sure each piece of evidence would be undeniable when the time came. I wasn't just working for recognition anymore, I was building an airtight case that would reveal the truth. And while I focused on strategy, I also made sure to protect my reputation. I maintained professionalism at every turn, ensuring that no one could twist my actions into something negative. I responded politely in meetings, credited him publicly when necessary, and never lost my composure. That restraint, though difficult, became my hidden weapon. It made the contrast between his arrogance and my competence even more striking, highlighting the eventual reveal. I also began mentally rehearsing how the confrontation would play out. I visualized presenting my evidence to the boss and clients, highlighting the discrepancies, and allowing the facts to speak for themselves. I imagined the subtle looks, the raised eyebrows, the stunned silence as the truth became undeniable. Each scenario became a blueprint for the real moment, sharpening my focus and solidifying my resolve. By the end of this period, I had a comprehensive plan in place. I wasn't just preparing evidence, I was orchestrating a narrative where his incompetence and manipulation would become clear to everyone, without me needing to appear vengeful or bitter. It was a delicate balance of patience, intelligence, and timing. And as I looked at my organized files, my notes, and my carefully tracked communications, I felt a sense of power I hadn't felt before. I was ready. The stage was set, and soon, the world would see the truth. And along the way, I realized something important. Revenge isn't about rage or impulsive action. It's about strategy, precision, and letting your actions, and your integrity, speak louder than words ever could. The day would come when he would expose himself not by my confrontation, but by his own arrogance and inability. And when that day arrived, justice wouldn't just be served. It would be satisfying. If you've ever felt powerless, betrayed, or overlooked, know this: Patience and strategy are your greatest allies. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't in confrontation, it's in letting the truth unfold naturally, while you quietly build your case. That's exactly what I did. And the next phase of my plan would bring everything into focus. The moment where his facade would crumble, and the world would see who really deserved the credit. The day of the client presentation arrived. I remember waking up that morning with a mix of anxiety and determination. This wasn't just another meeting. This was the moment where every careful step, every late night, every meticulously documented email, draft, and presentation would begin to reveal the truth. I had to be precise. I had to be patient. I had to let him reveal himself, while I remained calm and professional. I entered the conference room, carrying my laptop, presentation files neatly organized. The manager was already there, exuding confidence, as if nothing could shake him. He smiled at the clients, exchanged pleasantries, and began setting up the slides. My stomach twisted, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. I had to trust the plan. I had to trust my preparation. The meeting began, and almost immediately, it became clear why my strategy was necessary. He started explaining the project, my project, but stumbled on the technical details. He misrepresented solutions, struggled to answer client questions, and occasionally glanced at his notes in panic. My heart raced, but I remained silent. Each mistake he made was another piece of the puzzle, another step toward the revelation of truth. The client's expressions changed from interest to confusion. They asked specific questions about the methodologies, the data analysis, and the strategies I had implemented. He hesitated, fumbled, and gave vague answers. I could see the doubt creeping into their faces. The facade he had carefully built over weeks of taking credit for my work was beginning to crack. Then, when a client asked about a critical section of the project that had been my idea, he froze. His arrogance faltered, his confidence waned, and I knew the moment had come. I leaned forward slightly and, politely, asked if I could clarify the section. He gave a small nod, probably thinking it was just a minor assistance. But it was more than assistance, it was the chance for the truth to emerge. I began walking the clients through the work, carefully explaining each step, each calculation, each decision. I used the emails, drafts, and timeline I had documented, showing how the strategies were developed, the challenges addressed, and the solutions implemented. The client's expressions shifted from confusion to realization, as the pieces of the project began to make sense. And with each explanation, the contrast became undeniable, the manager's struggle versus my clarity and command of the subject. The manager tried to interject, but every attempt only highlighted his lack of knowledge. He misquoted data, gave incomplete answers, and at times contradicted himself. I remained calm, polite, and professional, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. The clients started directing their questions toward me, seeking clarification, validation, and understanding. I could feel the shift in power, a quiet victory forming in real time. At one point, the boss leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly, clearly noticing the discrepancies. The manager tried to regain control, but his attempts only made the situation worse. Every misstep was a silent exposure. I had anticipated this. That was the plan, to create a situation where his incompetence would be visible, undeniable, and self-inflicted. And it was working. I continued presenting, weaving in the subtle evidence I had gathered over weeks. Emails, drafts, and minor errors that had been overlooked all pointed to the same conclusion: I was the true architect of the project. The clients nodded, asked follow-up questions, and complimented the work with words that were finally directed at me. My manager's face, once confident and smug, now betrayed tension, frustration, and a growing sense of panic. It was a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because the truth was emerging, and sadness because it had to be revealed in such a public and humiliating way for him. But I reminded myself that this wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, clarity, and recognition for the work I had done. And in that room, the truth was undeniable. The clients asked if I had been the main contributor to the strategies and solutions, and I nodded, providing concise explanations and evidence. The manager tried to interrupt, But the boss raised a hand, allowing me to speak. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. I calmly laid out the timeline, referencing emails, presentations, and drafts, highlighting how each step had been executed under my guidance. The contrast was stark, and the clients were visibly impressed by my expertise and control. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had completely shifted. The manager slumped slightly in his chair, his earlier confidence completely eroded. The clients thanked me for the clarification, acknowledging my role in the project. My boss nodded with a quiet but unmistakable recognition, and I could see the realization dawn in his eyes. He had underestimated me, and the truth was now undeniable. I left the meeting with a sense of relief and vindication. This wasn't the final step of the plan, but it was the first public acknowledgement that my work had been stolen, and that the manager's incompetence could no longer hide behind arrogance. The stage was set for the next phase, the final confrontation where the full extent of his manipulation would be revealed. And this time, there would be no escape. This moment also taught me something important. Patience, strategy, and integrity are more powerful than anger. By staying calm, documenting everything, and letting the truth speak for itself, I had turned a moment of betrayal into an opportunity to expose the real story. And in the process, I had regained control not just of the project, but of my own career and dignity. If you've ever been in a situation where someone took credit for your hard work, you know how frustrating and demoralizing it can be. But the lesson here is clear: intelligence, preparation, and patience can turn betrayal into an opportunity for undeniable justice. And sometimes, letting the truth unfold naturally is far more powerful than confrontation ever could be. After the client presentation, I knew the next step was critical. The first cracks had appeared, but the truth needed to be undeniable. My manager had to face it publicly, in front of the boss and key clients, where every misstep would be witnessed and every deception exposed. I had planned meticulously for this, ensuring there were no gaps, no loopholes, no chance for him to manipulate perception again. This was the final act, and the stakes were higher than ever. I arrived at the office early that day, my documents organized, my timeline complete, and my strategy clear. The manager was already in the conference room, confidently rehearsing his lines, unaware of the storm about to hit. I could sense his arrogance. He truly believed he was untouchable. That arrogance would be his undoing. And as I set up my laptop and prepared my presentation, I reminded myself, remain calm, professional, and let the evidence speak. The boss entered the room, followed by a few senior clients. The meeting began with pleasantries, but the tension was palpable. I could see the subtle signs: the boss's inquisitive glance, the client's polite but attentive demeanor. I started the presentation by giving the manager the floor, as if everything were routine. He began explaining the project, and almost immediately, the cracks widened. Questions came from clients about technical details, implementation strategies, and design logic, areas where he had relied on me. He stumbled, faltered, and contradicted himself. He tried to recover with vague explanations, but the inconsistencies were obvious. I kept calm, silently observing, while the evidence I had gathered over weeks played out perfectly. Emails, draft versions, client communications, and presentation iterations were all at my fingertips. I had asked him to review the materials before the meeting, claiming it was to ensure alignment, and he had approved everything. Little did he know, each approval documented his complicity and highlighted his lack of competence. At the right moment, I asked politely if I could clarify a few points. The manager, confident as ever, nodded, thinking it was a minor contribution. But it was more than clarification, it was the unveiling. I walked the clients and boss through the project step by step, referencing emails, timestamps, drafts, and my documented workflow. I explained each idea, each solution, and each decision I had made. As I spoke, the room went quiet. The clients began realizing the truth, connecting the dots, and the boss's expression shifted from curiosity to recognition. My manager tried to interrupt, to interject, to regain control, but every attempt only made his incompetence more apparent. He misquoted data, reversed sequences of events, and gave incorrect answers to basic questions. The contrast between my calm, precise explanations and his fumbling arrogance was undeniable. The room now witnessed the reality. The project was mine, the ideas were mine, and he had been taking credit. His carefully constructed facade was crumbling before everyone's eyes. I presented the evidence strategically, pointing out the contributions I had made, the drafts I had created, and the approvals he had given without truly understanding the work. The clients asked for clarification on specific points, and I answered confidently, while he struggled. Every question he failed to answer reinforced the truth. His failure was not a result of malice or ill intent, it was incompetence disguised as authority. And in that moment, everyone could see it. The boss finally spoke, his tone firm but measured. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding regarding responsibilities and contributions," he said. "I appreciate the clarification." The manager tried to defend himself, but it was futile. The evidence was overwhelming. The clients nodded, acknowledging the accuracy of my explanations, and the manager's face drained of color. His arrogance had been exposed, and the room's energy shifted completely. I felt a mixture of relief and vindication. This wasn't just about me, it was about fairness, integrity, and the recognition that hard work and talent cannot be hidden forever. The manager had thought he could manipulate perception, but in the end, his own insecurity, his own need for control, had led to his undoing. And it was undeniable to everyone in that room. After the meeting, the boss called me aside. "You handled that very well," he said quietly. "Your preparation and professionalism are remarkable. I see now who really contributed to this project." I nodded, a quiet smile of satisfaction forming. I had not only exposed the truth but also demonstrated the strength of strategy, patience, and calm under pressure. Later, I reflected on the journey, the betrayal, the frustration, the long hours, the careful documentation, and the strategic planning. Every late night, every observation, every piece of evidence I had collected had led to this moment. Revenge had not been about anger, it had been about justice, about reclaiming what was mine, about demonstrating competence and integrity in the face of deceit. The manager, meanwhile, was reassigned to less critical projects. The clients and boss now understood the truth, and my contributions were finally recognized. I had not humiliated him out of spite, I had exposed the reality. And in doing so, I had maintained my professionalism and my dignity. That was the most satisfying part of all. The victory wasn't just personal, it was a lesson for anyone watching that truth, preparation, and integrity always prevail. If you've ever been in a situation where someone took credit for your hard work, remember this: patience, strategy, and calm execution can turn betrayal into an opportunity for undeniable justice. It's not about immediate retaliation, it's about building a foundation so solid that the truth cannot be ignored. And when that moment comes, the sense of vindication is beyond words. This is the story of how I turned betrayal into triumph, how I outsmarted someone who underestimated me, and how I reclaimed my voice, my work, and my future. And for anyone struggling in similar circumstances, remember, the power isn't in confrontation, it's in strategy, patience, and letting the truth unfold. Follow Outsmarted for more real stories of courage, strategy, and justice, where truth always finds its way to the surface. After the manager's exposure, the office atmosphere changed almost immediately. The tension that had been quietly simmering for months dissipated. Colleagues who had once looked away or remained silent began acknowledging my contributions openly. It was subtle at first, a compliment here, a question directed to me there, but soon, the recognition became undeniable. My work was no longer hidden, and the integrity I had maintained was finally appreciated. I remember walking into a team meeting a few days later. The manager sat silently, reassigned to minor projects, no longer the confident figure who had overshadowed me. The boss, now fully aware of the situation, made it clear who had been responsible for the success of the previous project. It was a gratifying moment, not because I wanted revenge, but because justice had been served. The recognition wasn't just professional, it was personal validation, a reminder that competence and honesty always have their rewards. One of the most meaningful moments came when a client reached out personally. They expressed gratitude for clarifying the project and acknowledged my role in delivering the solutions. It was a testament not only to my skills but also to the strategic approach I had taken. I realized then that success isn't just about talent, it's also about patience, planning, and knowing when to act. And in those small, meaningful interactions, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Reflecting on the journey, I thought about the months of frustration, the sleepless nights, the careful documentation, and the strategic planning. Every email, every draft, every client note had contributed to this outcome. And while the betrayal had been painful, it had also taught me invaluable lessons. I learned the importance of vigilance, of protecting one's work, and of navigating office politics with intelligence and grace. I learned that patience and strategy are often more powerful than confrontation and anger. I also began mentoring younger colleagues, sharing the lessons I had learned without revealing the drama of my own experience. I emphasized the importance of documenting work, maintaining professional integrity, and approaching conflicts with strategy rather than impulsiveness. It felt empowering to turn my experience into guidance for others, helping them avoid the mistakes I had once encountered. There's a certain satisfaction in using your challenges as tools for growth, not just for yourself, but for those around you. Of course, there were moments of reflection about the emotional toll the situation had taken. Betrayal by someone you trust, whether a manager, a colleague, or a mentor, is never easy. It shakes your confidence and makes you question your own judgment. But in hindsight, I realized that those emotions were part of the process. They fueled my determination, honed my strategic thinking, and ultimately led me to a position of strength and clarity. I had turned pain into power, frustration into action, and betrayal into a lesson in resilience. Over time, my career began to flourish. Opportunities one had been overlooked for previously now came my way. Promotions, challenging projects, and client trust all started to accumulate not because I sought revenge, but because my competence, integrity, and strategic thinking had been recognized and rewarded. It was proof that talent combined with patience and careful planning cannot be ignored indefinitely. The recognition I had long deserved was finally mine, and it felt well earned. I also learned the importance of observation and understanding human behavior. The manager's insecurities, need for control, and fear of being exposed had driven his betrayal. By recognizing these traits, I was able to anticipate his moves, design my strategy, and let the truth reveal itself naturally. It reinforced the lesson that in any conflict, personal or professional, understanding the motivations of others is just as important as understanding your own strengths. Looking back, I realized that the journey had shaped not only my career but also my character. I had gained confidence, strategic thinking, and emotional resilience. I had learned that staying calm, documenting everything, and letting the facts speak for themselves is far more powerful than confrontation driven by anger or frustration. And I had discovered that real justice doesn't always come immediately, it often requires patience, careful planning, and courage. Finally, as I reflected on the entire experience, I felt gratitude for the lessons learned and the growth achieved. Betrayal had been painful, but it had also been transformative. It had taught me to trust my instincts, rely on my skills, and approach challenges with strategy rather than emotion. And most importantly, it had shown me that recognition and success are not just about being seen, they're about being prepared, patient, and persistent. For anyone facing similar challenges, whether a colleague taking credit, a manager undermining your efforts, or someone betraying your trust, remember this: stay calm, document everything, and plan your strategy carefully. Let the truth reveal itself, and trust that integrity, competence, and patience will eventually prevail. And if you want more inspiring stories of resilience, strategy, and triumph over betrayal, follow AI Neurobeat, where real stories meet life lessons. Looking back, this story isn't just about betrayal or revenge, it's about strategy, integrity, and resilience. The betrayal I faced could have broken me, shaken my confidence, and made me doubt my abilities. But instead, it became a catalyst for growth, learning, and eventual triumph. Have you ever had someone take credit for your work? Or felt undermined by someone you trusted? Think about it for a moment. It's frustrating, isn't it? but the way you respond can make all the difference. In my case, I learned the importance of documenting every detail: emails, drafts, client communications, and every step of my work. These records became my armor and the foundation of my strategy. Patience is another lesson I want to share. It's tempting to confront someone immediately, to let anger guide your actions. But revenge fueled by emotion often backfires. I observed, I planned, and I let the truth unfold naturally. Timing matters. When the manager's arrogance finally exposed his incompetence, the result was undeniable: justice without drama. Strategy matters more than confrontation. I didn't want to humiliate him, I wanted to reveal the truth professionally and ethically. Understanding his insecurities and controlling nature allowed me to turn his weaknesses into proof of reality. And that's a lesson you can apply in your own life. Sometimes the smartest victory is a quiet, strategic one. Maintaining professionalism was crucial. Even under betrayal, staying calm and composed made the difference. The boss and clients could see the contrast between my clarity and his fumbling explanations. Think about that in your own workplace or life. Calm, prepared, and professional actions speak louder than anger. Finally, every challenge is an opportunity to grow. Betrayal taught me resilience, strategic thinking, and emotional control. What could have been a purely painful experience became a story of empowerment and achievement. If you've faced betrayal, ask yourself, what lessons can you take from it? How can you turn frustration into a tool for growth? If this story resonates with you, or if you've ever faced a similar challenge, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how you navigated it. And for more real-life stories of courage, strategy, and justice, subscribe to AI Neurobeat, where every story teaches a lesson, and every lesson inspires action. Betrayal can be painful, but it can also be transformative. Strategy, patience, and integrity always prevail. Remember, your work, your ideas, and your voice deserve recognition. Stay calm, stay prepared, and let the truth shine. Your moment will come, and when it does, it will be unforgettable.